Donna Hammond joins me. You are a union leader here in Portland and a native Portlander. So just thank you so much for joining me and talking with me about your perspective and adding some historical context. I'm so happy that you're chatting with me today.
Thank you for inviting me. And full disclosure, I'm coming to you today to speak my truth and my walk in this life, this journey. I am one woman who stands at the intersection of race and gender and the union movement. And I just want to be clear that I am not speaking on behalf of, any specific color or anything. It is my truth. And I believe that there's only one race, and that's the human race. That's how I was raised. We're all part of the human race.
And let's talk about your perspective and how you're coping right now with what's happening, not just here in Portland, but all around our country after the death of George Floyd while in Minneapolis police custody.
I'm struggling. It is mind-bending. I cannot process what's going on. I'm struggling with people not understanding or just the miseducation of our country, of the world, that people don't know the history of the world, don't understand the history of the United States. We've been sold some bull. Like this is all made up. Like there's no reason why people should be protesting right now. I know that my dad, the stories that I received growing up, my dad was almost lynched in Arkansas. When my parents moved out here to this paradise in the West, they were seeking refuge and wanting to have a place where they could raise their family. And my mother refused to go back to the South again. But when I processed the tape over and over again, the West was settled by folks from the South. So they brought a lot of those ideologies out here to the West Coast. And so there were some differences here, but it's not a whole lot different here than it is in the South, except in the South, you knew where you were. You knew what the principles were, and up here is a little different. So I'm struggling. I'm struggling because there are people here who believe that they're liberal and they're not racist, but they're not, for me, they're not against racism. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make, I think. And can you kind of expand on that just a little bit about there's a difference there?
Yeah, and Robin DiAngelo says it better in her book, White Fragility. She talks about, especially out here in the Pacific Northwest, and there's another trainer by the name of Bill Proudman who said the Pacific Northwest was the hardest place to do diversity work or inclusion work. He said because a lot of the white folks out here, they truly believe that if they were a vegan, they couldn't be a racist because they, wouldn't hurt an animal. So, I mean, it's a mindset that because they are progressive and they're liberal, that they cannot be a racist. Yeah, I see the look on your face, like they're vegan, they can't be a racist.
Oh man, that's just an interesting thought process to land on right there. And talking about that historical context, I mean, that is so important right now, and remembering whose history we've been taught And when we see the death of George Floyd and the protests that follow, this isn't the first time we've seen this. And does it feel like a little bit of history repeating?
Yes and no. I mean, we talk about repeating the incidents that we've seen over and over and over again, but it's just been continual. And this last week with the videotape of Ahmaud and, oh gosh, Brianna and the Central Park. I mean, when I saw that footage, I want to say the best thing that could have happened to Black people and to America is the technology of videotapes. And sometimes that hasn't even helped us. But without the videotape, when you listen to her call in Central Park, and if the police would have shown up, oh, brother didn't stand a chance. But he had the video. And in the case of Aubrey, the video, like they said, it's been said many times, they had the video in possession. They didn't get upset or there weren't any charges until we saw the video. And so it's a fear that I've had raising my son, the fear that I've had for Black men in this country. So I think it's just the timing, the COVID, the leadership in this country, just we're so discombobulated. We have too much on us right now. And I think you could maybe isolate and deal with one thing. It's just the compounded effect of having it all come to head right now, and that there's no leadership. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I've seen this play out before, and I'm loving what I'm seeing in the streets. I'm loving the protests, and I believe that the success that Martin had in getting legislation, getting policies implemented, was a direct result of Malcolm X. And you have to have the other side. You have to have, the peaceful protest, that's really great. But because the force that Malcolm put out there, by any means necessary, really, I personally believe that gave credence or gave folks the interest to sit down and talk to Martin, because they were so fearful of Malcolm. And so I think that the extremes that are doing the after hours stuff may have created enough momentum so that people would want to sit down and talk about a national reform for policing. Because this is absolutely insane. We live in two different societies. I want the American dream too, I want my family to have it. I want everyone to have it. But it disturbs me when people do not understand why are Black people dying more with COVID-19? Why are the prisons, where we make up a percentage of the population, but a higher percentage in the prison? Okay, so I know your question specifically was history repeating, and I guess I want to say it's just been a continuum. It's like another dig. It's what we know. This is our normal. Now you all, or the majority, you get to see what we see every day because we have a video camera. That makes sense?
It makes complete sense, Donna. It does.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about you in particular, and native Portlander, you've
Yeah.
lived here your entire life. What kind of systemic racism have you experienced? We talked about the Pacific Northwest in general, but here in Portland specifically, from your own experience, what kind of systemic racism or kind of inequalities too that you've experienced in your life?
Well, I was part of the busing program when they implemented in 1964, and I think that that was the good and bad. But um, I I learned how to build relationships when I was bused. I learned that because of a person's skin, that they weren't any better, smarter, they weren't other than I. I had developed friendships that I still have today from elementary school. But counter to that, I learned that there were people who didn't want me, didn't want to see me successful, didn't want me to be there, and did all kinds of things so that I heard as a kid, you need to go home, don't come out here, don't don't one day I experienced, specifically, because they used to rock our bus, they used to call us the N word. And one day when they were attacking us, and at the end of the day, a raw egg came in the window and landed on me, on my chest. And it was just devastating. And for the folks who were on the bus that day, I thought that they were all going to die because all of the Black men got off the bus. All of I called them men because I was the youngest, but all of the older Black boys got off the bus. And when I got home, my dad said, asked, where was my brother when he came in from work? And I didn't know if I would ever see my brother again. It took hours for him to get home, but he did tell me that that wouldn't happen again, that they took care of that day. So I had the busing incident. I got a good education. I was isolated when I went to high school, went to college, 2 years at the university, 2 years on University of Oregon. But then I decided to get into a career path in the trades because as a summer hire, I was a garageman. And I love working with my hands. And my dad had taught me how to, work on cars and work in the yard, but he also taught me how to knit and sew, right? So, but he said, you can do anything you want to do. So as a summer, I was a garageman, and then I went to apply for the phone company. And you have to imagine, in 1977, they weren't hiring females to be installers. And so for the phone company, I passed everything, physical, mental, aptitude, everything. But I failed the interview. They said that they had another position for me, a more suitable position for me. And they gave me a position as an operator, direct your assistance, what city, please? And so as after 3 months of doing that, I'm like, no. So I applied for the apprenticeship program and had no idea what I was getting into. And this is where I find the value of being bused. I don't think that I could have survived a 4-year apprenticeship in Portland, Oregon, or anywhere in a white male-dominated profession had I not experienced the racism and the torture that I went through as a kid. And so when I went to work as an electrician, when I started my apprenticeship, there were men who did not want me. And didn't want a female. I was one of the first women. And they didn't want any people of color. And that was just the norm. And so there were those men who wanted to take me off the planet. and I was set up to get killed a couple times that I know of. But then there, counter that, and just like what happened at the elementary school, there were families who supported me, and I'm kind of going back and forth. But on the job, there were white men, my brothers, who said, we're going to make you the best electrician that you can be. You were admitted into the IBEW, into the brotherhood, and so you're our sister. And so I always had allies. There were always more allies than there were those enemies. And so that has been my walk. Even when I went to work for a public entity and the manager tried to eliminate me in my position, I had 12 white men write a letter of support for me. They were all in my union. They wrote a letter of support to the bureau director and the commissioner in support of me being qualified to work at this facility. Now, the manager thought that his whiteness with the brothers, okay, was more of an alignment. And what they ended up telling the manager was our union membership trumped their whiteness. And so I'm here today as a business representative for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers because of my siblings and because I was raised in the union. Both of my parents were active union members, and because I learned early that Dr. Martin Luther King learned before his death, he had assimilated that if we're going to fight for civil rights, or why should we fight for civil rights or the right to sit at the lunch counter when we can't afford the meal? And the only way that we can afford the meal, Brittany, was through a union and having protections on the job and having representation and wages, fair wages, livable wages, and health care, benefits. And he learned, he understood that that was going to be our ticket for the American dream, that we had to have a union and protections. And that was what my dad told me growing up. He told me, he said, when you get a job, when you go to work, when you find a career, he gave me a caveat, 2 caveats. He said it had to be something that you enjoyed doing so that you never feel like you went to work a day in your life. And the other piece would be that it had to be a union job. Mm-hmm.
And let's move on to the kind of next question that, I think is important too, is why do you think it's important for everyone, no matter the race, the age, your status in the society, no matter what, to understand that history and of the protests and the message behind what's happening all across the country?
Well, information and knowledge will allow people to feel and understand and give them breadth and depth and maybe some empathy. I have a plan to watch the series. Have you heard of the series called 1619?
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's a lot of controversy around this production, this project, I should say. But I want to watch it, and so I can better inform myself of a lot of the details that we know. There's so much misinformation that's left out of our history books. I always found it interesting that in the books, Blacks came over as slaves, and then we went through there was a little talk about us in the industrial age. Then you have the civil rights where they maybe mentioned, I don't know, one or two, leaders. And then it was like, oh, that was it. But there was more than that. And people don't know what actually happened to people. And when I hear them say, why haven't you gotten over this yet? What was the question again? What was that, Brittany?
I think, just understanding that history. And I think that's what, you were talking about is it's whose history have we really learned?
Yeah. And so I wanted to briefly talk, when we talk about history and understanding the brain and understanding how things work, I had, because I was part of busing, Brown versus Board of Education, that led to the integration of the schools. There was what prompted that was the doll test. Have you heard of the doll test?
Yes. And
so it's been replicated several times, but it just breaks my heart when I look at these kids having to identify which is the good doll and which is the bad doll. And these are 4 and 5-year-old kids having to make that decision. And that's all based upon this. A lot of times people don't know, I guess at an early age, we have been given so much information unconsciously. We receive so much information about skin color. I would ask people to look up the synonym of Black. If you look up the definition, and there's not one thing, the only thing I can think of that's positive with the color Black is if you're in the Black financially. But other than that, you look up Black and it's just negative, dark, like blah, blah, But counter that with when you look up white. And so, the devil is bad, Black, the good witch wore white, the bad witch wore Black. And so that plays into our psyche. And that's where the implicit bias comes in, and where people are not even conscious of their behavior and their actions. And so that's so some of it is, so some of the maltreatment that I've had is based upon real racial stuff. But some of it is just, I've encountered just asshole. I don't always jump to, they did this to me because, I'm Black. They did it because they're a jerk. They treat, and the other benefit that I've had, and I need to share this piece, and I don't want to ramble too much here, but I've been afforded the opportunity of being a sister in the brotherhood, okay? And so I know the handshake and the secret code, and I know stuff. I see stuff. I see the way white people treat each other. Okay, and so I'm like, oh, this is messed up. If a lot of Black people could see this, they would have maybe a different perspective. That sometimes it is treatment to us because of our skin color, but sometimes people are just genuinely assholes, and they treat everybody. They are equal opportunity assholes. but when it's intentional, I learned how to argue and debate effectively with my brothers, and we got into a lot of disagreements. But I can't think of too many times where I actually felt with my brothers who were my allies, where I ever felt that it was racial. It, 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 it was racial. that it was really, majority of the time, because I'm 5'9" and they were 5'4", or, they had problems, she's taller than me, little man complex. But other than that, it really has been a good, if in fact, someone could walk in my shoes, walk in a person of color's shoes, get some information about what we have to go through on a day-to-day basis. Because I do have to process. Is this happening because, or is it just? Did I make any sense? Or did I just go,
Definitely made sense. Definitely made sense.
Can I add another piece though before we move on?
Yeah, definitely.
I have to go on record to say that in my walk, I have been pulled over by the police numerous times. I mean, I can't count them. And I am pleased to say that every time was wonderful. I mean, as wonderful as it could be being pulled over by the police. I haven't had an adversarial or confrontational incident with the police. Even when I was dirty, when I was driving dirty and I knew I was dirty, when they could have taken me to jail, they could have impounded my vehicle, they could have done a lot of things. I was dirty. And the officers would say, there's this one scenario where I had run a red light, and the officer had ran my plates, and he came back and he said, he had this ticket. He said, I can give you this ticket for X amount of dollars. He said, or what I would, I had an option of taking the amount of the value of the ticket. And he said, you can go open up a savings account for your child. And then I asked him, I said, can I have the third? I'd like to propose a third option. And he said, what's that? And I said, can you give me the amount of the ticket, and then I go open an account for my child? And he looked at me, he goes, lady, you're pushing me right now, right? But those are the kind of interactions that I've had, like when I said when I was really dirty, like dirty with expired tabs, no driver's license, no proof of insurance, no registry, nothing. Officer pulls me over and he says, well, I hope you take care of this tomorrow. Please, lady, please take, get your act together. But so I understand that an injury to one, this is what my union family teaches me, an injury to one is an injury to all. So I hear these stories. I have family members who have had a different interaction with the law. And I saw what happened. We see it over and over, and it just breaks my heart. But that is not my walk. And I just want to speak to my walk and what my experience has been. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely does. And speaking from your perspective and your experience, something that we've talked about is that the Rodney King riots were less than 30 years ago. Did you think that in that time that you'd see that same amount of pain spilling out onto our streets as we are seeing right now?
No way. None. No. As a matter of fact, didn't we overcome racism because we elected a Black president? Isn't it all done? Wasn't it all done? No. I did see progress, and which led me to decide to have a child and raise a baby. Before that, but I saw things getting better. I traveled to the South in the 80s, and I was treated very well. So I thought we were on a path to something better here in this country. I lived in New York City. I lived in Miami, in Florida. So I'm like, things are better. But things changed. Things changed a lot. hmm Yeah, they changed a lot. And maybe it was a false illusion that things were getting better, but underneath, the brewing. But what has happened in the last 3.5 years is just, yeah, it's just been, for me personally, I did not think that I would ever see the lead, that degree of, I'm going to say, hatred coming out of the White House from the leadership. I thought it would always be undercover, not so direct, and I think that's what has fueled a lot of this.
And so what do you want our younger generations, who their eyes are opening up for the first time maybe to some of these injustices, into that history of systemic racism in our country? What do you want our younger generation to know and to seek out?
I want them to do some research. I want them to challenge themselves to explore their implicit bias. I want them to listen. If they're if they are in the majority class, majority population, be silent and listen to folks when they tell their story. Don't try to one up and say, well, this is what happened to me. And, it's like, that's not what this is about. Learn how to be an ally. Learn how to listen. Learn how to speak up when you see bullshit, and be able to call bullshit on bullshit. Yeah, there are a lot of things wrong in this country, but there are a lot of things that are right. And I think that I would ask people, the next generation, to really think about the impact that their behavior and how society or the norms, how it's impacting others. When you're sitting, are you comfortable in your neighborhood? Why aren't others here? In your workplace, why aren't others? Ask the question if you're on a hiring panel, or because I've always said that when two people show up for a job interview and when they have equal credentials or even close, think about what it took for one of them to get to that point. Okay? There's just a lot of work to be done. Just a lot of work. Can I add another piece, because something just popped up for me that when you were asking me earlier about racial impacts, and I want to share a piece about my son. Is that okay? Can I do that?
Yeah, of course.
So, he was raised in inner Northeast Portland and attended a small private school, the Black Educational Center. And then I mainstreamed him into Portland Public School. And I had learned that about expectations and how if a person expected a certain thing, usually, it's a fulfilling prophecy, basically. And so one of the things that I would do would be, and there's a whole technical school about this, but I would go into the classroom and I would tell the instructor that Yusuf had been tested before school started. Every year I did this. Yusuf had been tested, and that his test scores indicated that he was going to excel above all of the other students in the class that year because of his tests. And I wanted the teacher to expect that out of my child, because we know that when they don't expect it, see, he had come from an environment where he was loved and nurtured and everybody expected him to do well. And I knew that in this other environment, I needed to have that same expectation, because I know that if they thought different of him because of his skin color, if they weren't woke, that it could have adverse effect on my child. And so when he got into high school, and I had gotten into a neighborhood because for the school, they had an international baccalaureate program, and I wanted him, to get the best education he could. And so he struggled a little in this class, and his counselor actually told him, she said she did not understand why he was in IB classes, because he would not attend college. And so, being who I am, I said, we need a new counselor. But how dare you say my child is not in, this would have been 2000 or 2001. The school counselor questioned the academic rigors of my child and told him he would not be going to college. I would not make that up. So I say, so when you look at the advantages that some people have had, what the younger generations need to know, because I hear people question, why don't they just get an education? It's hard when people don't expect you to do well. It's hard. It's just, I would like for people to know that, or the younger generation to know, that everything isn't as it seems. This is America, but it's not freedom. Everyone is not living free and everyone does not have the benefits that this country can provide. And I am pleased to say that I listened to my parents, and I have a good union job, and I have a lot of siblings across the country. It's an international union, Canada, and across the country. And the leadership has been wonderful. And there has been assholes, there have been jerks, but overall, after 42, 43 years of being a sister in the brotherhood, I have no complaints whatsoever. And when they call for the union now, they say there's an issue. So one of the things that I do is if there's an issue in the workplace, they call the union. They call me, and I'll take care of the issue. It's like I negotiate the contracts. I am the one, and I didn't get here by myself. I got here because of allies, where people saw something in me. And I had applied for a couple of the jobs. No, Donna, we have these other jobs. We have something else that we think that you would be a good fit for. And Cliff Davis, after I ran against him for business manager, Cliff Davis hired me as a business rep. Yeah. So it's been a wonderful journey. This is my walk. It wasn't easy, but I could not have made it to where I am today and could not have afforded the lifestyle that I have had it not been for my union membership.
So important. Azine, it's so powerful. Well, Donna, is there anything else that you think maybe I've left out or that you want to include?
I just think that we need to treat everyone as individuals, that we need to go below the surface, that people need to know that there are no genetic markers, none, that indicates race, that some people somewhere, they created this social construct. They created this thing so that we wouldn't come together. We've been played, and this construct says that we cannot be together. We cannot be friends. So if they can pit you and I against each other and different races against each other and different genders, then they can continue to be rich. And they can sit back and look at the 99 percenters and they can enjoy their lives. I question, one last thing, I guess, when I started my apprenticeship, and this is the sad part for me, and this is the part that if I had more time, I would study this. I wish somebody would tell me how this happened. When I started my apprenticeship, I was told that when I completed my program in 1982, that I would be making $25 an hour. And I was single, no dependents. 1982, $25 an hour. Okay? As an electrician. Not bad, right? Not bad. 1982.
Yeah.
And I did. I made $25 an hour in 1983 for about 2 months. But I guess I say all of that. What happened from 1982 to 2000, damn near 22? How many years have gone by? The wait. Back then, you could purchase a home in Northeast Portland for maybe $37,000, $45,000. And today, our wages are a little bit more than that, substantially. But the price of a home is, how many more times? Exponentially, yeah, it's like, okay. So our capitalistic society has not worked for everyone. People at the very top are getting richer, and they keep saying we don't have enough money to pay the workers. Really? Who can live on minimum wage? Who can live on $12 an hour in Portland or anywhere? Who? There's a lot of things that saddens me, that if everybody made a livable wage, we would not be in this situation that we're in right now. If everybody had health care, if everybody was treated fairly, I'm rambling now, but what would make a young man go into a church and kill the congregation? What would be going on in his brain to make him hate some folks at Bible study for him to go in and kill? We have some work to do in this country. It's like, why? Based on this, so he had got some bad information somewhere that the skin color meant something. What have we done as a society that people actually think that skin tone makes a difference? That's horrible. That's horrible. That is like dumb. So we have a lot of repair to do, and I don't know if I will see it in my lifetime, but what I'm really hopeful is that the folks in the street, the folks at the table, that people are having real conversation. I've received a lot of calls, a lot of people checking in on me and my family. Folks that look like me, folks who don't, folks who I have relationships with. The COVID-19 has given us pause. But on top of this, people have had time to sit back and reflect, put their priorities, in order. I have some friends who are Republican who have who are starting to question their politics. And so I see, hope. I do see hope. I see hope that there's going to be a better day. We're going to see a better day.